you creative? Is it the case that your family and friends would agree, yes, you're creative? Interestingly, many answer no. One reason is we tend to think about creativity from an aesthetic or design perspective. When we think of creativity, we tend to think about beautiful things, compelling art, or notable inventions. We tend to think the outcomes of creativity are pleasing objects. But creativity is relevant in solving problems in business and other areas of life. Think about notable leaders like Bill Gates or Meg Whitman, former CEOs of Microsoft and eBay, respectively. We may not think about creativity from an aesthetic point of view when we think of them, but these individuals ran their companies well and successfully championed their vision. We can imagine the host of problems and challenges they had to overcome. Creativity is not just about design or aesthetics or pleasing physical objects. To be creative also means to be an effective problem solver. Whether we lead a civic organization, a group of volunteer soccer coaches, a team of educators, or a large corporation, we're all searching for ways to grow and develop and distinguish ourselves from the competition. In order to do so, we need to be effective problem solvers, and this means being highly creative. So how do we unleash our inner creativity? That bud that may be dormant, but could blossom if given the right conditions. One very important way is through people you don't know well. I started my career as an engineer. And engineers have this terrible stereotype, rightly or wrongly, of not being the most socially astute people. Not being the ones you think of entering a party and lighting it up with their wit and charm and making new friends wherever they go. Not being socially sensitive. Think Sheldon Cooper, the main character in the TV show The Big Bang Theory. Similar to the stereotype, I did my work, I did it very well, and I went home. So when I began reading about personal relationships at work, I was fascinated. Because when I was an engineer, I never really thought personal relationships at work were very important. The more I read, the more it became clear that personal relationships at work are critical, but not in the way you might think. The more I read, the more I began to suspect that work friendships actually may be overrated, and that people we don't know well may be highly important. Now, I should clarify that by people we don't know well, I'm not referring to the hundreds of LinkedIn followers you may have. I'm not talking about the thousands of Facebook friends you can connect to with an instant e-blast. What I mean are the people you interact with to some degree face-to-face, but are merely acquaintances. This can be the barista you see regularly when you buy your favorite half-calf latte. This can be the neighbor with whom you have coffee just 2 times a year. Or this can be the colleague from whom you occasionally seek advice. So we conducted 2 studies to understand this question: can these acquaintances unleash our inner creativity? The first was a survey of research and development professionals, and the second was an experiment. The first study involved research and development professionals. We surveyed the engineers in that setting and asked them about their personal relationships at work. We also surveyed high-level managers and leaders and asked them to rate the engineers' creativity. Contrary to conventional wisdom, which is that the close relationship matters, we found that engineers with many acquaintances were considered to be highly creative. Close friends didn't help, and in some cases actually harmed their creativity. One explanation is that people we don't know well tend to think differently. Consider a simple pencil. A high-tech IT person may see the pencil as an outdated, antiquated device with little use in today's world. An artist, in contrast, may see the pencil as a supreme tool of choice, the best way to express her inner thoughts and desires. A student about to take the SAT may see the pencil as a symbol of stress and torture. So when we get feedback from the IT guy, the artist, and the student, this suggests to us that there's not just one way of looking at the pencil, prompting us to think broadly of other possible solutions and be more creative. Among the engineers that I studied, I found that acquaintances were more likely to be individuals with different functional backgrounds and different levels of tenure within the organization. In contrast, consider your own social circle. If your friends are anything like mine, they're supportive and encouraging, and they think like you do. This is the supportive girlfriend phenomenon. You know, you have a problem, and you go to your best girlfriend for advice. You explain the situation. She listens empathetically and says something like, I know exactly what you mean. I can't believe they did that. You go, girl. Well, the same thing happens at work with our colleagues whom we call close friends. We get support and encouragement, but not different perspectives. So these findings got me thinking. I wondered if the source of the feedback, friend or acquaintance, affects our creativity, if who we get feedback from, regardless of what they say, matters. So we conducted another study. The second study was an experiment. In this case, participants were everyday working adults from a variety of fields and students. We asked them to solve a hypothetical problem. We gave them a scenario and a role and told them to imagine you received an email from an employee with a problem. But before responding, you have to seek feedback from 3 people. Here's the twist. Some participants were told those giving them feedback were very close friends. Other participants were told those giving them feedback were mere acquaintances. We had independent coders rate the participants' solutions. These were the solutions they came up with after receiving feedback. Here's what we found. Participants receiving feedback from acquaintances were highly creative no matter what feedback they received. In the case of close friends, it was more complicated. It really depended on what was said. When the friends actually offered a different perspective, this helped the participants' creativity. But we know in the real world, this is less likely to happen because we form close relationships with people who are like us. We feel comfortable, communication is easier, we know what to expect, and so on. So the source of feedback matters, friend or acquaintance. Virtual acquaintances always boosted creativity. Friends harmed it in some cases. Why? We simply pay less attention to unique information from close friends. This is a surprising finding. You may be thinking, no, not me, because we think that we value feedback from friends more than acquaintances. I explained this finding to a class of graduate students one day, and a very bright student, Matt, raised his hand, And he had this look in his eyes that suggested a combination of an aha moment and frustration. So I called on him. I was intrigued. I knew he was going to say something interesting, and he did. He said, "I totally get this. I'll give my wife a piece of advice, and she ignores it. 2 weeks later, she gets the same piece of advice from someone else, and suddenly it's the best advice she's ever heard, and she acts upon it." While Matt feels frustrated when this happens, as we all do, the good news is his wife wasn't intentionally ignoring him. It's that we hold implicit, non-conscious expectations that people we know well will agree with us and support us. So even if we're not aware that we're doing it, we pay more attention to unique advice from the virtual stranger. So you may conclude that in order to be creative, you should ditch your friends. This is a position that's difficult for me to advocate. As a former engineer, my natural tendency is to have a very tight inner circle, made up of a few very close friends and family. But as a recovering engineer, I now know that people I don't know well can actually spark my creativity. So the next time you have a problem, don't knock on the door of the colleague's office who you commiserate with and whose shoulder you cry on when you have a problem. Knock on the door of the person you chatted with briefly at the last company-wide meeting, the virtual stranger. The next time you call a meeting to solve a problem, invite a virtual stranger, someone who's not part of the team, to sit in on the meeting and empower them to ask questions. My message is simple. We all can be creative and answer yes to the question, are you creative? Our creativity simply may be dormant. One way to nourish it and help it blossom is to seek out people you don't know well, acquaintances, and even virtual strangers. Thank you.